You did it for the money. The reason that most people do most things. Your new Latina firecracker of a wife has a spending problem. She calls her family all the way in Colombia every day. She has hundreds of shoes, and what do you have? Superiors that rate your work as a glorified clerk as satisfactory. Verbal humiliation in front of the entire office after you left a briefcase with some worthless documents on the subway. It's been 20 years of official American mediocrity, working for the CIA. You contact the Soviets. You want $50,000 for a meeting. It's a con job, you think. Short and sweet. You'll provide information that is essentially valueless. They'll provide you with more money than you make in 1 year, and you'll both be happier. But things are never simple, especially when large sums of money and two world powers are involved. And so two things happen. You realize you've crossed a line that you can never uncross, that you've damned yourself to a life in hell, and you realize that the Soviets will give you more money than you can ever use. Well, if you're going to hell, better to be rich than poor. When they approach you with more money and questions you know the answers to, it's as though you've been offered a second chance at life, a chance most men past the age of 40 never receive. Time passes, and although you experience paranoia, the Russians have your back, and the money is so pure. Your work friends wonder where you get the money, and you tell them your wife's father is a wealthy man, and you wire the impoverished Colombians some money just in case your people grow suspicious. The Russians want moles. You're to tell them about your opposites, your clones, the Soviets who are supplying the Americans with information. You give them Polyakov, codename Bourbon. Word is, Polyakov got upset when the Soviets wouldn't save his firstborn's life by sending him to an NYC hospital. Polyakov claims he's a patriot, that he's disgusted by the corruption of the Communist Party's elite. It doesn't matter to you. Polyakov gave the US valuable information about the split between China and the Soviets, and because of this, the US put down roots in China. These are the kinds of things that bother the Soviet Union. And so Polyakov disappears from the map like a radar that's been silently switched off. There are dozens of men who you sacrifice to your newfound wealth. To your wife's new wardrobe, you are responsible for many deaths. But who isn't? You drink, pass polygraph tests, buy expensive suits, buy a nice home, buy a Jaguar, tell your friends about the wealth of your Colombian father-in-law. Much of what we remember about the Cold War are moles, deep penetration agents, as they're referred to in the business. Moles make for the best movies and television shows. During the Cold War, Americans who decided to betray their country had one of two reasons: money or ideology. The moles were men and women who worked for the government, middling bureaucrats in the CIA, FBI, and other diplomatic positions. Once they'd flipped the switch, they could perform a variety of functions. But there was more to a Cold War spy than being a double agent. In addition to their interest in the identities of agents who had betrayed Russia, the Soviets were interested in information about weapons, particularly, as you might intuit, of the nuclear variety. In the race to construct the most powerful arsenal in the history of the planet, it helped to know what stage your rival was at. So a really useful thing for a spy to do might be to steal classified information and deliver it to the enemy. And yet the most important thing a spy could do, according to one very powerful Soviet military man, was to perform active measures. Major General Oleg Kalugin, the KGB's head of foreign counterintelligence for the KGB from 1973 to 1979, described active measures as the heart and soul of Soviet intelligence. Active measures included disseminating propaganda, forging documents, assassinations, terrorist acts, and other attempts at sabotage. In other words, the purpose of active measures was to throw a monkey wrench into American culture. If war ever did truly break out, it would be useful if American citizens and their allies didn't have a starry-eyed relationship with the White House, which meant that spreading conspiracy theories was a tactic that could be extremely useful. One of the more well-known active measures by the KGB was Operation Denver, which sought to introduce the idea that HIV was invented by the US as a biological weapon. Another integral active measure was exacerbating racial tensions. When Martin Luther King Jr. refused to be influenced by the Soviets, they began to portray his as an Uncle Tom. And when he was assassinated, they went to work spreading theories that he was killed by the CIA. What was happening didn't really matter. It was how the Soviets could paint the picture that mattered. After King's death, the Soviets shifted their focus toward Jewish Americans, forging anti-black pamphlets under the title of the Jewish Defense League. Operation Pandora was an elaborate plan to set off a bomb in a heavily black part of New York City, after which calls would be made to prominent African American organizations claiming that it was the work of the Jewish Defense League. In other words, psychological warfare was the name of the game. 85% to be exact, according Yuri Bezmenov, a Soviet journalist who defected to Canada, pitting local demographics against each other, painting the government as a manipulative enterprise with only its own power on its mind. These are the tactics that truly defined the Cold War, whether we think of it that way or not. While we mythologize the time as one of intelligence gathering, documents with maps of nuclear facilities, the identities of rogue informants, what brand of underwear the president wears, the Soviets' ultimate goal was to spread communism throughout the world, and to do this, they needed the West and its sphere of influence, such as underdeveloped countries in South America and Africa, to lose faith in the American way of life, to see cracks in shiny armor capitalism and democracy. The double agent stuff makes for the best story, and have no doubt it certainly existed. Part 1 of this video is loosely based on Aldrich Ames, who is responsible for gifting the Russians over 100 American counterintelligence agents who were operating in the Soviet Union. He's also likely responsible for 10 executions, and the truth really is that he did it in large part because of his second wife's spending habits. But the less glamorous or intriguing reality is that Soviet spies were primarily responsible for manufacturing realities. In the end, this is how you win an ideological war, not by knowing how many nuclear missiles your opponent is sitting on, but by sowing fear and mistrust in the hearts of your rival's fans.